I See You was a film directed by Adam Randall and tells the story of a small town in Cleveland, Ohio, having strange things happening as two boys are found missing. Our protagonist's husband is the town's detective and is investigating the disappearance of these missing boys. As the film goes on, though, strange things start to happen to our protagonist, played by Helen Hunt, as well as her son, played by Judah Lewis, and her husband, played by John Tenney, where they mysteriously find cutlery in their washing machine, and other instances where the detective finds himself locked in a closet. Now, I came across this film on Prime, and I didn't have anything to really watch at the time, so, I had no idea what this film was. I hadn't heard about it anywhere, so I decided to go in with an open mind, not watching the trailers, and boy am I glad I did. This is a very well made and well crafted film. I really liked it from beginning to end. Now, I'm actually surprised this film wasn't advertised anywhere or talked about by anyone, really, because after watching it, I feel like it's very underrated. I mean, yeah, it's not perfect film, but, I'll discuss that later in this review. But it really is a small, competent film. I think that's the best way to describe it. Now, discussing the things I like about this film, I really like the atmosphere surrounding the film. It's a very small film with limited places to film, and they surprisingly pulled it off really well. There are only about 2 or 3 places where the film really takes place, and the film manages to make it feel really tense in those settings. There are other things that make the film feel really unsettling, like the score and the cinematography. I mean, this is a very discomforting film. To those like myself who like psychological thrillers, and I say thriller even though this is labeled as a horror, because it didn't really feel like a horror. I guess at times, but for the most part, it just felt like a really, just a really good thriller. But if you like good psychological thrillers, then you are most likely going to enjoy this film, because I was feeling tense for most of it. I think everything on a technical standpoint is great, because there wasn't really anything I felt was off, considering the film was taking place in 1 or 2 locations. And I think that's what I praise the film for the most, is that this film shows that you don't need a really big budget to make a good movie. You just need to have the idea and the story and, the creativity. And once you have that, you may realize that you don't need tons and tons of money to make your film. I mean, obviously, yes, you do need money to put it into production. But for this film, I'm kind of glad they didn't go to more locations, because I feel like that would have put too much in the film and it would just feel unnecessary. If you ever heard that saying, less is more, this film is a good example of that. So let's talk about the acting, because for the most part it's good. Not like it's not great, but I mean it's just good for the most part. The 3 main actors who play the family make the environment a bit more tense because of a certain backstory they have, which I won't get into because of spoilers, but when you watch the film, you find it really hard to watch this family try and, carry on with their lives. And I thought the actors did an excellent job at that. Now I'll get into some of the things I didn't like about this movie, because as much as I love the concept, it's not flawless. So I'll start with some of the nitpicks I have, and one of them is the son, played by Judah Lewis. As much as he does a good job with his character, the actor, he can be a real asshole in this movie. And at the start, you don't really care much about him. They do later explain why he's somewhat like this, but even when it's addressed with certain backstory, you look back and you still feel as if he's just this really unlikable character, and you don't really want to see him on screen. He also does have a character shift later in the film, and I felt like that wasn't really set up well. I felt like it could have been explained a bit better. I don't want to spoil it, but that's kind of what happens. My other issue is really the main character. She doesn't have a whole lot of backstory. Like, you don't really know what she is doing for a living. They only discuss some of her pasts with someone else in the film, which affects the family, but that's not really enough to give her character, or to give her character anything, in my opinion. A lot of people were complaining about the cinematography. I didn't think it was an issue. There's some shots that aren't great, but they're still competent. I think what people were complaining about were some of these drone shots. It wasn't too much of an issue for me. I felt like they were fine, A lot of people felt like they were fake, but, I don't really look out too much for cinematography in films if it's, if, like, in the film, the whole film, it's, good for the most part. Now, my main issue with this film is how it lies to the audience at the start of the film. Within the first hour or 30 minutes, the film tells you what type of movie this is allegedly going to be, and it turns out to be completely different. A good example of this in another film is Split. And, spoilers in that movie. So throughout the film, you look at James McAvoy's character and you just see him as a regular guy, who has a personality disorder. So you think it's going to be a psychological thriller because this is what happens to, people in real life. But towards the end of the film, you realize that it takes a supernatural approach to the film. And me personally, I kind of would have liked to know that going into the film. It's the same thing with this film, but, in a different way. It's just something I don't really like what movies do. Because in the first 10 minutes, I had an idea about what this film was going to be. And it kind of changed later in the film. And it feels like the filmmakers are, kind of lying to the audience and then addressing it later. And I don't know. I just didn't really like that. Now, according to many reviews, people didn't like the twist towards the end of the film because they felt like nothing was set up towards the beginning for people to guess that conclusion. I can sort of agree, but I don't think it's too bad. And I feel like you can look past that and just enjoy this movie. I mean, if you're going to go into this movie trying to figure out, the mystery behind it, maybe a bit difficult, but it wasn't an issue for me. Overall, I thought this was a very well-made film. From the score to the cinematography to the acting, it all made for a good thriller. I'm going to give I See You an 8 out of 10. I highly recommend this film to anyone who's interested. I'm really surprised it hasn't been talked about because this came out last year. Now it's on Prime. It's free on Prime, so if you get the chance, you should watch this film. But if you have watched this film, what did you think about it? Let me know in the comments below, and I'd like to see them. Anyway, thank you guys for watching, and I'll see you in the next one. Take care.